but yeah, this project was sort of come out of the response, basically lottery set up fund for local community response to the coronavirus, and to what the coronavirus has brought up within communities. So it's not like just responding to the problems that have come up from coronavirus itself, but what that's opened up in terms of the thinking around what could happen, what could change within communities, what has it meant. And obviously we were talking to them before about transition and what transition groups were doing, and obviously a lot of the stuff that transition groups are interested in, I think, can very much be seen as a response to a lot of the stuff that coronavirus has shown. In particular, I think that the fact that the resilience of communities probably needs to be improved vastly in order to deal with any sort of shocks that we have to the systems that we rely on. So transition is very much looking into how we can provide things much more locally, how we can make our communities better and more resilient. So it was a very good fit in terms of this project and the funding pot. So the first thing that we have done, and a lot of you probably came along to them, is in start September we held a couple of sessions looking at around what is actually going on, and we had 4 sessions which are now available on the Transition Banks Forward website. Rich, if you could stick the link into the chat, that would be great. So people could, if you haven't seen them, there's a link that Richard's about to put into the chat where you can check them all out. It's transitionbanksforward.org/whatis. And those sessions looked at we're exploring that question of where we were at now. We've had this with what's gone on this year. So in terms of the coronavirus, but also in terms of how we're responding to climate change and other things which are impacting on communities. So they were really great. And if you haven't seen them, I'd really recommend checking them out. The second part of the project is the seed funding, and the seed funding is for groups in England only, and that's because the National Lottery grant that we received was to provide a project to groups in England. We also, through our own funds, have extended that project out to Wales and Scotland in terms of the visioning exercise and the summit, which I'll talk about in a bit. But the seed funding itself is only available to groups in England. Another part of the project is looking at inclusion and diversity and how to increase and how to make transition more inclusive, and how to sort of bridge the gaps that there may be within your community between the different groups that exist within it, and that sort of thing. So what we've been doing is we've also been speaking to an organization called Navigate, who run specific training on this, and they are going to be running a course for 20 transition groups, and that's going to be, we've just launched the application process for that, so it's free to attend. Obviously there can only be 20 groups maximum, but we would really encourage people to apply to that. All the information on how to apply and that sort of thing are on those web pages. Then the next piece is the What Next Summit, and we're just currently in the early stages of planning that, but what we're hoping that will be is going to be an online conference. Obviously, because of the coronavirus, we can't really plan anything in person, but actually making it online means it's probably a lot more accessible anyway for a lot of people who can't travel or wouldn't be able to travel, halfway across the country. So the What Next Summit, we're planning between the 20th and 28th of February. And what we're hoping that to be is loads of workshops, participatory talks, speakers, groups sharing skills, a whole load of stuff around how transition can bounce forward. So we're really up for hearing from groups who would like to share their stories about things they've been doing in terms of like what techniques or what skills and knowledge they've been using to further transition within their community. And we're also going to be looking at, setting up lots of spaces for people to engage with each other and to learn from each other and develop and build their networks and make them much larger. So we can really want to build on the idea of the transition community within Great Britain. And we're also going to be inviting people from other organizations and networks who are doing work on the ground. So hopefully you'll be able to connect with other people who may be nearby or doing similar things, particularly at that local level. So ideally stick that in your diaries, the 20th to the 28th of February, and that'd be great to see you there. And we'd be doing a lot more, we'd be letting people know a lot more about that in the coming months, because we're just beginning to sort of plan that now. So the next piece I want to talk about is the visioning guide, which we've just launched today. And if you could stick a link in, Rich, to the chat for that, that'd be great, so people can see where it is. So the visioning guide is quite we already have a couple of activities on Transition Network website which look at visioning. One's visioning a post-transition future, and the other one was about producing a timeline. And those two activities are still great ones to do and really useful and can complement the new guide that we've done. But what we've done with this new guide is we've come up with something which we feel is much more comprehensive and much more around bringing lots of different parts of your community together to sort of do joint visioning. And it's based on a lot of the activities that Rob's been doing based around his book, What If, which is about imagination, and which is what the Transition Banks Forward project is sort of based around, is the whole idea of what is to what if to what next. And the idea was to create this process. It's also based on the Three Horizons framework, which looks at how you can make actual change happen within your community. So there's 3 different stages to it. And the first one is what is, and that is to reflect on what is going on in your local community. And it looks at three aspects. The first one being resilience, is the things that are actually going on now in your community which help to make it more resilient. So, it could be like you have a big allotment scheme, or you've got a community energy company, or you've got a car share club, or you've got, you just got a really good mutual aid group now where people support each other, that sort of thing. So all those things, like considering all that stuff, all that activity which is happening already in your community. The second part is to consider what are the things in the community which you want to relinquish. So what are the things that are there which are barriers or which are causing problems within the community? So identifying those aspects of the community, of your community, those things which are going on, which you'd rather not, which would rather not be there because they're causing problems or stopping your community being more resilient. And the third focus is restoration, and that's to consider what things need to be put in place in order to repair the damage that has been done, to your community by aspects of climate change or austerity or inequality or biodiversity loss, poverty, all these sorts of things. So it's to really to get an overview of where you're at this moment in time, in terms of how it feels to be living in your community at this moment in time, particularly also with the impacts of the coronavirus and the obviously the shutting down of the economy for particular certain amounts of time, as all these things have had that impact. So the idea is to get that overview. The second part of the vision exercise is called What If, and that's sort of split into 2 parts. And the first part is what we call the transition time machine, and in a little while, Rob will take you through that part to give you a bit of a taste of that. And this is where you can let your imagination go wild and think of all those things that you would love your community to be like, and what would you like to see, what would it feel like when you walk around, all those sorts of things. And I'll leave Rob to go through that a bit more in a minute. And the second part is, once you've done that, is you come up with the what if questions. And the what if questions are really important because it's like the bridge between the what is and the the transition time machine, your what if, your vision, So how do you get, what questions do you need to ask to get from is to if? And then that then feeds into the final part of the vision exercise, which is the what next, which is actually then the planning, the sitting down and going, okay, we've got these two sort of polarizing positions in a sense, where we're at now and where we want to get to. And we've got these series of questions. And then what do we then do as a community? What are the next steps to get there? And this is like the crucial point in a way, because that's the bit that will start you on the journey to turning and transforming your community into a more resilient and better place to live. And what we're recommending at the moment is, because it's a new activity and because it needs to probably be done online, because we don't know where we're going to be in terms of being able to meet face to face or in person, is that we recommend that you run it once with your own group. And the reasons for that is because before doing it with your wider community and inviting other people in, it would be really good to get a good understanding of how to run it on Zoom. And the guide that we've created is really in depth. It takes you through it step by step. So if you give it a go with your group, I think you'll easily be able to do it when you invite the wider community in. So that's one reason to do it with the group initially. The other reason is that by doing it together, you'll get a really good understanding of where everyone is coming from within your group. So it's a really, good activity to see where each member of your group is coming from and what they want to see happen within the community. Then that also can feed into whether you want to do the visioning activity, because the vision activity can be done looking at your whole community, or you can do it looking at a specific aspect. So you might want to look at, community food growing, for example, as a more focused area, or you might want to do it with the wider group, with a wider holistic vision. But by doing it initially in your group, you can then decide on, okay, we'd really like to focus on a specific area, or we'd really like to focus on, the community as a whole. So it enables you to work out what your area of focus would be when you're thinking of inviting the wider community in. What we've done is we've slightly tweaked the what next section for this version of the exercise, because what you're going to do with that final part is you're going to look at all these sorts of things, these questions of, so what do we want to focus on? What can we do now? What other information do we need? And who do we need to get around the table? Who do we need to invite to the wider community webinar? So it's like that final section is really preparing you to then do your vision go out into the wider community. And then once people have done it, you'll be able to run this activity quite easily, but it definitely, we think, will pay dividends to run through it with your group initially. And the other piece is that because the summit's happening in February, and we hope that a lot of you will be coming along to that or checking out a lot of the sessions, there may be a lot of stuff in the summit that's really going to spark your imagination and make you think, okay, God, we've really heard about this. This is great what they're doing here. We want to try and do that in our community. And then you can build that into your visioning process, which you do post the summit. So after the 28th of February, you could then, you have all potentially much more, many more ideas or things that you're inspired by that you might want to then explore through that visioning. I think that's pretty much everything about the visioning exercise. And obviously you can have a proper read through it. It's on the website, the link that Rich has put in. And the other thing I would just like to say is that we've tried to develop the visioning exercise in a really sort of general way, in the sense of like, so it can be done, you can use it to look at a massive thing, a really complex system like your whole community, or you could use it just to really focus down on a really small part of activity you'd like to do. And any group could use it to, you could use this in any group, this visioning exercise. It's not necessarily just linked to transition. It's very much based on, thinking about what the focus is, what you want to focus on. And then you can use those stages, the what is, what if, what next, to look at any aspect of your community. So yeah, I'd really encourage you to take it into other realms or other groups maybe you're involved in, or I don't know, even thinking about what you like to do within your family or something. I don't know. There's lots of ways I think it could be used. So that should be good. So finally, in terms of staying up to date with the project, we've got a Facebook page that people can sign up to. We've also got a Twitter account, a website, and there's a newsletter. And Rich is just going to stick all those links into the chat for you. And it'd be great if you just keep an eye on those. If you're not already on the website, on the newsletter, definitely sign up to that, because everything that we're doing around Bounce Forward is being sent out on that link. And that's the bottom link of the one that Richard's just put in. It's the MailChimp one.
So it's Rob here, and I what we thought would be good would be to give you, rather than us just to run you through the document in a kind of a dry way, that it might be good to do it slightly more experientially, and to actually do one of the activities that is in there with you. And I can share some of the ways that I've used it and how I've seen it work, and hopefully you'll feel a bit more comfortable in terms of running it with your own group and with your organization. So for the last couple of years, I've been doing an exercise, and some of you might have seen it in talks, that I call the transition time machine. And the reason for it is there's that beautiful quote by the poet Rilke, who said, "The future must enter into you a long time before it happens," which I just think is so absolutely beautiful. And so it's an exercise that allows us to think ourselves, imagine ourselves forward 10 years to 2030, not to a utopia, but to a future that is the result of everything that could possibly be done, having been done. And I think all too often when we are campaigning for things, we convince ourselves that we're not really going to they're not actually going to happen, but we have to campaign for them anyway. And we often, there's something really powerful, I think, about really projecting ourselves forward and allowing ourselves to imagine how the future would be if the things that we were arguing for actually came to pass. And it's an exercise that I've done with groups of 10, and it's a group exercise that I've done with 1,500 people in a hall in Belgium. It's also an exercise that I do in every episode of the podcast that I do, From What If to What Next. And at the end of this, I'm going to play you just like a 3-minute clip of some of the visions that the guests have come up with during that exercise. So in a minute, what we're going to do is we're going to do that exercise. A couple of things to mention. One of the things that's really important with the exercise is to have a way to mark moving from 2020 to 2030. So in a small group where you're actually there physically in person, the way that I do it is to ask people to close their eyes. And then when we go forward, we literally take a step forward. Everybody stands in a line facing towards me. And then I say, now we step to 2030, and it's a physical step into that. When you do that in a big hall with 1,000 people or whatever, that's quite clearly a bit tricky and a bit of a health and safety hazard. So the way I do it there is to get everybody to hum. I say to everybody, this is what a time machine sounds like this, with you all joining in, and everyone goes, and it's fantastic. And then when we actually do it properly, then you just have this beautiful hum that dies away, and everybody sits there in silence for a couple of minutes. So one of the ideas of it is that it really helps us to create what I call memories of the future. You know, that idea of we create a kind of a new North Star in front of ourselves. So, but what I've developed during lockdown has been, I worked with a sound artist who created a kind of a soundscape of what it might sound like if you were picked up in 2020 and sort of lifted out and then gently plonked down to 30. When we do this in a minute, I'm going to play you that sound. And if it's something you find might be useful, then you're very welcome to use it when you do it. So we're going to do the exercise, and then we're going to put you into breakout rooms. And the idea is to just sort of discuss. When I do it in small groups, I just ask people, keeping their eyes closed, to turn to the person next to them and just share what they saw, what they experienced. So the invitation tonight is that we're going to put you into a little breakout group and to just sort of brief with that person. What did you see? What did you feel? What did you experience? How was that? And then afterwards, then we're just going to capture some of your key observations in short phrases in the chat, just to get a sense of that. Okay, so does that all sounds okay? So the invitation is, if you would like to get yourself comfortable, make yourself comfortable, and to close your eyes. And just here, slightly out of view, is the time machine that I built during lockdown from some plans I found online and bits I had lying around in my garage. And today we're going to attempt the first act of time travel, collective time travel, in the history of the transition movement. So when I turn it on, we're going to imagine ourselves traveling forwards 10 years through time. And those 10 years that we travel through were a time of the most extraordinary, profound change. They were a time when things that in 2020 felt completely unimaginable, built in cascades of possibility and positive change. Institutions and organizations that felt completely irreplaceable crumbled and fell away, and new things emerged instead of them. And the 2030 that you emerge into is the result of that. And these 10 years were a time of such extraordinary, deep, brave change that they are still the time that future generations tell great stories about, sing great songs about the things that happened during that time. So when I turn the time machine on, just imagine that you are picked up and then drop down gently into that 2030. And for just 2 minutes in your imagination, take a walk around in that future. Take a walk around. What do you see? What smell? What do you hear? Okay, so I'm going to turn it on now, and I will see you in 2030. I hope you found it a useful exercise. I do this with so many different settings, and I've never yet had one where people have said, "Oh, we have a great new IKEA on the edge of our town, and I've got this really great new massive phone." It's somehow there's something about this exercise that takes us beyond short-term kind of pleasures and desires, which is what capitalism sells us, things that are short-term pleasure, into a much longer-term contentment and happiness. And it's a lovely thing to do. And when you do this and you generate things like this, I often do where strips of paper, when you do this physically, strips of paper that say "what if." Thank you, Paul. I was quite shocked that this worked for me. I felt I was far too cynical for this. There are things that you can do when you do this with groups as well, where because we often feel a bit silly, sort of doing this kind of thing with other people. You always do it with your eyes closed, and then at the end, I always ask people to turn to somebody they didn't know before they came. So that also reduces the slightly kind of giggliness that can sometimes kick in when you do this. But I always get these strips of paper with what if written at one end and get people to write them down. And when you generate all these different what if questions, they can be beautiful, that they create something that you then have to figure out the steps. And in the guide, there are other exercises that you can then do once you've done this vision. You can then in groups ask, what were the values that were fostered during that time that meant we could get there? What were the what if questions people were asking in 2020 that meant that we got there? And so on and so on. There's lots of them in there in the guide. And when I did the I forgot what I was going to say then. I can't remember what I was going to say. Anyway, so I hope this is an exercise that you will find useful. Like I say, I've done it with many, many people, and it somehow gives people a taste of something. And as someone was saying during the break, during lockdown, it's become much easier to imagine a lot of these things, because we had the first couple of months, there was much louder birdsong and there were much less cars and the air did smell much cleaner. And it's really important that it's easier for people to connect to it. So just the last thing that I want to do with you is, like I said before, I do a podcast series called From What If to What Next, which you're very welcome to get involved with. And every 2 weeks we have 2 guests and we explore a what if question that was sent in by listeners and subscribers. And at the beginning, I ask the guests to do this exercise based around whatever the what if question is that we're doing. So if it was, what if birdsong drowned out the traffic, or what if a universal basic income sparked a revival of the imagination, I asked them to take us on a walk through 2030 based around that question. What would it be like in 2030 if we had had a universal basic income for 7 years? Walk us through what's the vision in your head that gets you out of bed every morning. And so I just have spliced together. So tomorrow I'll be posting an hour-long podcast, which is a lot of those put together. But just to give you a little taste, I want to just play you this, which is about a 3-minute clip of some of the visions that come from people when you ask them to do this exercise. And it starts with that same audio again. Hello.
The city really changed since the Ministry of Imagination was born. The city has become a huge laboratory in which everyone can participate.
You can hear laughter, not just the laughter of children, but the laughter of adults.
The place is alive with activity. There's people everywhere doing things.
People can walk freely in their bodies, regardless of their shape, their size, their abilities, their gender expressions, the color of their skin, their age, and there's an embrace of that.
We care about the things that we have. We cherish them, we repair them, we make sure that they were lost for a very long time.
Faces are beautifully, lined, full of the marks of laughter and a life well lived. It smells like growing things.
The air is filled with birdsong again, and London looks more like a rich parkland or forest.
All of the city's children, whatever their social condition, can have access to quality food.
We have cities and towns with clean air, which we can smell, and smell the flowers and smell the trees. We hear the birds, we swim in the clean water in our lakes and our rivers.
We have a diversity in habitats of wildflowers and scrub and brambles and blackthorn.
Thyme and lavender, can smell ripening fruit, the cherry tree, this vibrant explosion of colours and smells and of people.
All that tameness is suddenly dispensed of as being so last year.
Access to nature has been recognized as a human right.
We're going to be using re in our language. We're going to be rebuilding, refurbishing, remaking, reusing, recreating, reinventing. The re is going to be a big part of our language.
Police and prisons and the armed forces were massively defunded, and that money has gone into robust preventative health care and well-being programs that also contribute to a rich imagination.
Financial insecurity has been eradicated. People no longer go to work because they have no choice.
And so all these workspaces that used to be occupied by big banks are now, of course, being redirected and used for creative spaces of all sorts, whether it's technical or artistry.
If you see girlfriends meet each other, they won't say, oh, you got this new dress, but they will say, oh, you got the same dress that you wore last week, but now you've made a little change about it. And that's so fancy and that's so fashionable.
Yeah, so that's the kind of thing that we can tap into when we do this exercise. So I really hope that it's something that you find useful. And what we'd love would be that when you run this exercise and you gather up these what if questions that come out of this process, that you gather them up in such a way that you can also share them with us, because they're going to be one of the key things that will feed into how we design and how we shape the What Next summit, which will be coming, as Mike said, in February.